I now welcome representatives from the CSIRO Staff Association. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, will you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear today?
I am Susan Tonks. I am the CSIRO Staff Association Section Secretary.
I'm Steve Rentoul. I'm a climate scientist at CSIRO and appearing as a delegate of the CSIRO Staff Association.
And I'm Everard Edwards. I'm a research team leader in the Agriculture and Food Research Unit, and I'm appearing here as a governing councillor with the CSIRO Staff Association and delegate.
Thank you. If you have one, I now invite you to make a short opening statement, and at the conclusion of any remarks, I will invite members of the committee to ask questions.
Thank you, Chair. Before we begin, I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all meet and extend that respect to any First Nations people participating today. The CSIRO Staff Association is a section of the Community and Public Sector Union and is the primary union representing employees at the CSIRO. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee as part of its inquiry into the funding and resourcing of CSIRO. There's no denying the desperate circumstances of our appearance here today. Over the past year, CSIRO has lost more than 800 jobs and now another 350 full-time equivalent research roles are set to go. The scale of the cuts under the current government are set to surpass those made under the Abbott government. While the government's emergency MyInfo funding is very welcome, it's a once-off measure and does not address the CSIRO's long-term sustainability. Put simply, CSIRO is barely surviving and needs urgent help. Our submission was informed by a survey of more than 400 Staff Association members, which focused on the impact of recent CSIRO job cuts on research capacity, workforce morale and scientific infrastructure. CSIRO plays an irreplaceable role in delivering world-leading science and innovation that underpins Australia's prosperity, security and well-being. Urgent action is needed to protect CSIRO's capacity to deliver public good science and maintain Australia's global standing. This includes immediate funding to prevent job losses, investment in research capacity and long-term support to ensure financial sustainability, as well as improved organisational transparency and accountability. CSIRO has been responsible for some of the most important scientific innovations in Australia's history. Public investment in science and research is often what delivers innovation that lays the groundwork for commercial breakthroughs and increased productivity. Half of all the staff surveyed stated that they were aware of basic or fundamental research conducted by CSIRO that lacked industry funding partners and may be affected by proposed cuts. CSIRO faces rising research costs above inflation, ageing infrastructure and ongoing capital and depreciation costs far exceeding current capital funding. While the 2026-27 MyInfo funding is welcome and will address urgent pressures, again, it is a one-off injection and will not address long-term funding issues. A loss of funding would mean losing independent sovereign capability, making Australia reliant on foreign expertise and risking national interests in areas like water security, climate projection, and pandemic preparedness, while weakening our world-leading environmental, mineral and biosecurity research. CSIRO's training and career pathways for early career researchers are valued for nurturing future scientific leaders and maintaining core expertise, ensuring the next generation of scientists can build the knowledge required to manage Australia's unique challenges. However, recent cuts and reduced opportunities are driving talent overseas, risking a brain drain and diminishing Australia's competitiveness in emerging scientific fields. The survey respondents described a disconnect between executive management and the realities faced by researchers, with decisions often prioritising short-term fiscal metrics over long-term scientific capability. Over 66% of our survey respondents said they do not believe CSIRO leadership understands the importance of specific scientific work when allocating resources, while over 80% don't believe staff are genuinely consulted about priorities before decisions are made. Nearly 25% of survey respondents reported that poor equipment hindered their work, while 40% pointed to inadequate infrastructure as a challenge in the workplace. Significantly, almost 95% of participants identified insufficient staffing as a critical barrier to conducting effective research. These issues have led to project delays, increased stress and reduced research quality. The ongoing and proposed cuts have significantly diminished CSIRO's research capacity. For example, survey participants stated that the loss of a Data 61 staff member has already resulted in the termination of key projects such as flood management in research in Northern Australia. Losing research capability of that nature is particularly hard to comprehend, particularly when confronted by coverage of widespread flooding in Northern Territory and Queensland. As a matter of urgency, we are calling on the government to provide additional funding to halt and reverse staff losses and suspend further cuts pending an independent external review of CSIRO's restructure process. Over the longer term, CSIRO's appropriations must increase at least in line with CPI. Indexation arrangements must reflect real research and infrastructure costs, and Australia must commit to rebuilding CSIRO's research capacity as a proportion of GDP. There will be plenty of evidence before this inquiry in support of the important and unique contribution that CSIRO makes to the Australian economy and community, but there is also a real human impact. For many CSIRO staff, the months ahead will be traumatic and painful. Important research, the product of months and years of dedication and effort, will be abandoned. Lifelong vocations will be questioned and challenged, and for some, careers will prematurely be ended on the very worst terms. CSIRO staff and the Australian community they are dedicated to serving really deserve better. Immediate and long-term funding, accountable leadership and transparent and consultative decision-making with genuine staff engagement is essential to restore and sustain CSIRO's capacity. Today I'm joined by Staff Association members Dr Everard Edwards and Dr Stephen Rintoul, who will also make brief statements of their own. Dr Edwards is a team leader from the Agriculture and Food and Research Unit, and Dr Rintoul is a team leader in the Environment Research Unit. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear here today.
Thank you. Mr Edwards, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to briefly comment on the impacts of the long-term reduction in real-term funding to CSIRO. So I will hit 20 years in CSIRO in a couple of months, and during that time I've gone through at least 4 episodes like the current one where either myself or my teams that I've been part of or have led have been impacted by reductions in staffing and reductions in funding. And the first of those was less than 2 years after I joined CSIRO, where the site I was at, which was a horticulture site in Victoria, was closed down with a loss of more than half of the positions that were there. The result of that and then subsequent reductions is that the number of people committed to horticulture within what is currently the Agriculture and Food Business Unit reduced from around 80 when I joined to around 16 staff to support that industry. So I don't really intend to focus on horticulture in my comments today, other than right now, but I think it's a good illustration of the impact of how funding has changed our ability to support these industries. So horticulture is an industries that are critical to the nutrition of our nation, and whilst we've increased horticultural production over the last 20 years, it's not increased as much as the population has increased, and so therefore I would say it's a key area that still needs to be supported. So currently, CSIRO expects that 70% of research across the research unit is externally funded, and that includes the overheads, which typically are around about 115% of direct costs. And so the impact of this is that we actually no longer really have the ability to support new and up-and-coming industries or smaller industries in the way that we did in the past. If we look at something like the wine industry, CSIRO had a key role in supporting the success of that in the 1980s. But right now we can't really do that because we commit most of our money that we have towards research to agencies or companies that have significant funding that they can provide to us. So because of the leveraging that's required, and that means that if we go back to compare with, say, in the mid-1990s where this really started, we just no longer have the ability to support industries in the same way that we did, and this is directly because we no longer have adequate funding to support investment into those industries. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rintoul.
Hi, my name is Stephen Rintoul. I'm an oceanographer and climate scientist at CSIRO based in Hobart. During my 35 years at CSIRO, I've held many roles from postdoc to acting chief. I've led many national and international ocean and climate research programs, and I believe this experience gives me a useful perspective on the challenges faced by CSIRO, and in particular, the Environment Research Unit. I thank the inquiry for the opportunity to speak to you as a delegate from the CSIRO Staff Association. I am very concerned about my colleagues losing their jobs. This is a very tough time for many excellent scientists that have dedicated their careers to solving Australia's biggest challenges. However, I am even more concerned about the future of Australian science and what this means for the nation. As many submissions have documented, CSIRO's appropriation has not kept pace with the cost of doing science. In real terms, funding for CSIRO has gone backwards for many years. The funding model for CSIRO is broken. Generations of CSIRO leadership have attempted to cope with reduced appropriation in real terms by seeking external funding. The appropriation funding was first expected to be leveraged to obtain 30% co-investment, then 50%, more recently at least 70%, and preferably full cost recovery. But once all the appropriation is fully leveraged, it's the end of the road. And this brings us to the present, where deep staff cuts have been made, are proposed, and further cuts seem likely without a sizable and immediate increase in funding. What are the consequences of reduced funding for CSIRO? In my own area of climate science, my concern is the following. Almost every sector of the Australian economy and society is affected by climate, including water, energy, food security, transport, health, national security, and community safety. To respond to the challenges of a variable and changing climate, Australian decision makers urgently need to know what lies ahead. Cutting research at CSIRO Environment reduces our ability to provide Australians with the information they need to secure a healthy, safe, and prosperous future. Proposed cuts in climate change projections, sea level research, atmospheric properties that affect climate, and the drivers of Australian climate and extreme events will reduce CSIRO's ability to enable effective adaptation and enhanced resilience to climate hazards. Government must recognize that funding for science is an investment in the future. Thank you.